Thank you, everybody, for joining. If any of you were at Blueprint, this was a session that we gave at Blueprint a month ago, but it's still very relevant. Now, I've broken down today's session. These are, the topic today is talking about cyber threats regarding your JD Edwards system. So there's some generic cyber threat material, and we're going to probably spend 20 minutes talking about that. And then we'll get into some JD Edwards specific things that have, you can do and things that you've changed. So, and we've put that towards the end. We've tried to figure out what the best way to present it was, whether put the JD stuff up front or towards the end. So we're just going to talk about some of the cyber threats that are common, and then some of the things you can do in your JD system. Oh boy, I struggle to go to the next page. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this I haven't figured out the polling in Zoom yet. I'm a GoToWebinar person, but I'm going to just kind of do this open. You don't have to respond. I'm just going to kind of go through it. What do you think the #1 cybersecurity threat to companies today is? And the answer is email phishing. Far and away, it's much easier for the hackers to trick somebody into turning over the credentials than it is to hack in and break some 256-bit encryption. So it's easier to just try to fake it out. And in today's times, what is occurring, everybody and their brother now has email protection. Most companies have email protection. The cybersecurity experts have put in good tools. The hackers know about these. So what they've switched to is using a combination of the phone and email. So what they'll do is they'll send you a text, or they'll send you an email, or they'll make a call and then follow up to give them credibility. If the hackers just send you an email, they got less than a 10% chance of getting you to open it up nowadays, which is still extremely high for this day and age. But depending upon people not paying attention, doing two things at once, open the wrong thing. But they find that if they follow up with a phone call or a text message, that percentage goes up into the 40s. So from a 10% chance of getting you to click on a link to a 40 just by doing multiple media connections at a time. So that's one of the areas that you need to be careful about. So we'll talk about the general landscape, then we'll move into specific thoughts. Email phishing. According to KnowBe4, the average ransomware request in 2021 was like $111,000. I believe that number is actually higher now. It goes up all the time. It doubles if you pay the ransom. As you still have an outage and still have to restore your system. And also, the general industry recommendation is to avoid making the payment as your cost tends to increase. I wonder why I can't get the page down to work. There we go. I got 2 page down buttons since I found the right one. So the only way, this is an interesting thought process, and this comes from a lot of the CISO educators in this world. The only way to be 100% sure that your system is safe is to turn it off. Makes sense, right? If your system is turned off, you won't be hacked. However, then you have 0% functionality, and that's not useful either. But the minute you turn your systems on, you are no longer 100% safe. And just kind of think about that for a while and let it set in. So here's kind of an overview of the cyber attack process. What do they do? First off, a lot of them are professional organizations, big business. Many of these people are just go to work and work an 8-hour job, just like many of us do. Not that we work 8 hours, but they go to an office, they have shifts, and their job all day long is to break into our systems. So the first thing they'll do is they'll try to acquire credentials. And there are tools that can check to see if you're on the dark web. I know that I belong to several, like my insurance company, Nationwide Insurance. They have cyber protection for you, and they provide it at no cost, and they do dark web checking. We have tools that we can use to do dark web checking just to make sure that your credentials haven't been sold, or if they have been sold, that you've mitigated them. Most of the browsers, and I have a couple of videos on checking your browsers, web browsers, will show you if you've been compromised on the dark web, or if you've shared passwords and they've been sold. So after they get your credentials, they'll do, phishing and social engineering to try to entice you to click on the malicious code. And then once they get in, they'll look for 0-day vulnerabilities or whatever, however, open holes on your firewall to gain access to your system. So here's just a little bit of history over the last year or so on some cyber threats. Many of these are what they call third-party supply chain style of attacks, meaning they try to get into your system through your vendors, but they'll and even like the one from Target back in 2013, one of the first big ones, they got in via an HVAC system where the vendor just wasn't protected. So a lot of these are using Revel, dark side, and they're kind of like as a service type of organizations. There is the organization that provides the nefarious tools, and then there are basically affiliate companies who don't write the code, but they're the ones that go out and engineer the attacks, utilizing, and they pay back to places like Revel and DarkSide so that they receive basically a commission on the work that they go. GSI has been involved with a couple. Kaseya was one that we didn't actually have any Kaseya attack, but one of our partners did. The Log4j exploit in December is big. It's still, people are still living with that today, since that Log4j exploit was used just about anywhere Java that was doing log gathering. And we had two products that had, pardon me, that had Log4j in it, but we weren't using it, so we just removed the code. It wasn't, we just had includes into some of our code, but although we weren't actually using it, that's all been remediated. So pardon me, guys. So one thing that has changed in the last 2 years is they've gone professional. They have been professional, but they went from just encrypting your files and trying to get you to pay a ransom to also exfiltrating the data. Exfiltrating is stealing your data as well. So before they start encrypting your data, they will exfiltrate, steal some records, so that in addition to having you pay a ransom for unencrypting, they can then come back to you later and say, hey, not only did we encrypt your files, but we stole your data. Now we want more money to not release your data. Many of you probably seen them posted. Some places that don't pay the ransom, and then they find their data then posted on a public forum. And again, a lot of these places are doing ransomware as a service. Revel, DarkSide, Lockbit 2.0 is a backend tool. The advantage of Lockbit, and it's particularly nasty because it's extremely fast. If you have a tool like Sophos protection, Sophos may catch it with a 0-day type of attack, but by the time you get to it, they've already encrypted like 20,000 files before you even know it. And in addition, Sophos doesn't necessarily know if they're exfiltrating your data and have stolen it in advance. So that's one of the things Lockbit is known to. So poll question number 2, what is the first thing that you should do if you've been hit by attack? Remarkably, when I gave this in at Blueprint, we did have 3 or 4 people that knew it. First thing you should do, air gap your system. If you're not sure which machine was hit, if you know without a doubt that you've been hacked, I wouldn't even go for this to get the permission from if you're a CISO, I would not even ask permission from the CIO or the CEO. I would air gap the system and then go talk to them. Air gap the entire system if you don't know the entry point. It can take you half hour, an hour to find out where the entry point is. By then, your system may have had some vertical movement and some horizontal movement. And that's really dangerous at affecting you wide open. So what immediate actions can you take if you get hit? Okay, so the first thing, let's say you were tricked into opening a link or an affected document. Let's say you're a company that sells something and you're asked to participate in a RFP. So you've been hit. They may have stolen your credentials at this point in time and may have put in like a little dropper file on your system. And that's when the infection occurs and begins to spread. So one of the things that the ransomware people need to know is that their code will survive a reboot. So they'll try to make sure that they affect you in a way that if you were to reboot your machine, their code will still come back and continue on its way. So, but before they encrypt you, they will exfiltrate you, gather data, and then it will encrypt you. So by the time you get that encryption message, you're probably too late. So if it's not obvious that you've been affected, some things you might want to look for is you might not be able to open a file or it appears corrupted. I mean, that does happen by normal use of a computer, but nowadays you might want to think twice. File extension may get changed. You may even see an alarming message on your desktop saying that you've been hacked, or you might look in the file folder where you're expecting files to be seen. Say you'll see Decrypt files, may give you a warning. You might get a countdown message. If you see a strange window, especially in a browser that you cannot easily close, it may be a pop-up. And those are the two ways that hackers get into your system mostly right now as a end user, not talking about servers, but as an end user, is through email hacks and browser hacks. So if you don't use email and don't use a browser, you're less likely to get hacked yourself. Usually they want payment in Bitcoin. That may change. There are now tools to track Bitcoin transactions. And I was just reading an article yesterday. A healthcare company in Oklahoma paid a $50,000 ransomware, and the FBI got it back because they have the tools to trace Bitcoin now. So I'm sure the hackers will come up with another way to require payment. I know they will. Also, and this happened to my son-in-law. They even can find printers and might start just kicking out a message to one of your printers that you've been hacked, and you might not find out until you've dumped a ream of paper. But it'll just repeat over and over. You've been hacked. Read this file. You've been hacked. Read this file. So, and you can kind of see we've got a sample over here to on our screen that shows a little bit of that. So, and here's a screen from Lockbit, something that somebody I know had seen. All of your important files are stolen and encrypted. And if you're lucky, they give you a location that you can call that is legitimate. A lot of the hackers nowadays are not trying to steal from you. They're using your machines as jump points to another machine. This was something we learned recently talking to the FBI. Yes, we've been involved with some ransomware, not ourselves, but other companies where we helped remediate. And we did talk to the FBI, and we say, well, why did they come to us? They didn't ask for any ransomware. They just started encrypting all of our files. It's like, because you are a jump point to a bigger company, they make it look like it came from your site as opposed to theirs. And that's particularly dangerous because there is no place that you can pay a ransomware to get your files back. They just leave you in a dead state. And really all they're doing is cleaning up their mess to try to hide the fact that they were there. All right. Infection action. Add this to your incident response plan if it's not already there. Also, make sure you print out your incident response plan. If you're hacked and your incident response plan is electric, is electronically stored, you may not be able to get to it. So print it out. If you're the information security officer or in charge of security, print it out. Air gap your system. Unplug everything you can. Don't delete anything. Watch antivirus isolation. That's very key, because oftentimes the infection started, but antivirus is in effect. And if they haven't been successful at shutting it off, or maybe it has been turned off, then you may have some kind of indication. You also, when you start doing your research, you need to find who's patient zero, who was infected, because again, these can travel vertically and horizontally in your system. Vertically would mean from one layer to the next. Horizontally, it'd be from one machine to another. If you have, let's say, a DMZ and they break into your DMZ machine, but they use your DMZ machine to get into your inside network, you've moved vertically. So gather any property metrics as much as you can. Determine the attack scope. They love shared folders, those SMB type connections, NAS devices, USB devices, etc. Also, you might want to, in advance in your incident response, track maybe some cloud share drives that you might use, SharePoint, OneDrive, and you may need that for restorative capabilities too. You may lose all your files, but oh, hey, Jim sitting in the other room had replicated that file folder onto his own machine, and that copy is still good, but ours on the main site has been missing. You may need that. So try to know where everything is. This is something that you should do, and you're going to need to do this for your insurance reasons. If you are looking to collect on your cyber insurance policy, you will need to make sure you contact the FBI or somebody. In many cases, if somebody steals money from you, let's say they get you to do an ACH transfer, that's illegal, the local authorities will need to be involved. In many cases, they're the authorizing, but you want to report this to the FBI, IC3, or CISA. You could do all of them, but one of them is usually good enough. 3-4 years ago, when we saw a ransomware attack and reported it to the FBI, we never heard anything, just went into like the bit bucket. Now I think the FBI's got many more resources, and you are likely to hear from them as well. Also, CISA.gov is a great place to go to get reports of nefarious activity and what's happening. I find it to be a half a day to a day behind the times. But if you're not paying attention, it's a weekend or something like that, and you might want to keep an eye on your email if you're a security officer for Saturday and Sunday notifications, just in case there's something that you need to be worried about. If you see a notice come in on a Saturday morning that says that VMware has been hacked and that particular product is something you use, you might want to look to make sure that you haven't been hacked. So determine the malware strain. Some attacks just affect files, other exfiltrate data. There are also free decryption tools for some strains. In many cases, the FBI will recommend that to you. I would do some research today. I mean, after you're done here, go just kind of Google free decryption tools, bookmark it so that you're prepared, right? If in the heat of the moment, you don't think of these things, but when you're planning ahead of time, you'll know in your incident response plan to go look to see if the particular strain that you may have been hit by, it has a decryption tool, and it might help you. But also remember, these hackers are going to hit you pretty hard. They're going to have time bombs for you. They give you 24 hours to pay. So this malware is hidden in really, really nasty places. One of our team members received a PDF today, which we do allow PDFs. We don't allow executables, but we do a lot of communication with PDFs to clients and et cetera. But this one PDF did actually have some JavaScript code in it that looked like it could be malicious. It might not have been, but it was flagged by our scanning tool as potentially malicious. And our IT guy looked at it in depth and said, "Yeah, don't click on it. It's got bad behavior in it." So you have to look at malware being hidden. Again, they use multiple arrays of tools as well. Few things you can do from response. You can, hopefully your backups are good. If you're using JD Edwards, database backup is very critical. I'll talk a little more about this. If you can get a backup, you may or may not have to pay the malware. Second thing to try is using a third-party decryption tool. Third response, you may have to pay the ransom. Understand your deadline. The hackers now know that if they do pay the ransom, there's a good chance that you will have contacted the FBI. The FBI probably, if it's a big enough amount, will probably help you. If it's 1,000 or so, FBI probably won't help you. But if you pay like $500,000, you're in a healthcare or industry related to defense, whatever, they're gonna help you. But understand your deadline. Sometimes they are serious. They may increase the price after 24 hours or 48 hours, or they might just dump your data and move on to the next person and say, hey, you had your chance, too bad. Other places you can just accept the data loss and rebuild from scratch, and that may be an option for you as well. I'm going to go through this rather fast because we're running. I'm running a little low on time. This won't have time for any questions. You can read through this. Restore files from backups. Here's just some sections on where you can look for it. One topic in here is immutable backups or air-gapped backups. They're not exactly the same thing, but darn close. Air-gap means your backup device is not available on the network, but I've found that all air-gapped devices at some point in time have to connect in order to receive new files, and therefore at that point in time may not be air gap for a short period of time. And I know somebody who had an air gap backup that brought the backup online in order to copy a new backup, and it was immediately hit by ransomware. So I tend to prefer a combination of air gapping and immutable. Immutable is like 25 years ago, worm drives were very popular. Write once, read many, or good old-fashioned tape backups. If you're not in the cloud, if you're looking locally. Really hard for a hacker to wipe out a tape backup that's sitting at an offsite file. So do want you to think about it. Also, when you rebuild your machines, in many cases, removing the malware is not advisable. For instance, you have a JD Edwards server and a web server, and it's going to take you 4 hours to restore the file. Well, it only takes you 4 hours to build the file. You build the file server. You build a new server in 4 hours. It's clean. You've done a clean new, so you have to look at that as well. Some machines you might want to restore, others you may want to wish to rebuild from scratch. So then you got to go after that final step, go into prevention mode. Try to decrypt. If you know the strain, there's you might be able to find that from the message that you're given. You might want to Google this. There are sites that will tell you the strain. If you know one of your encrypted files, they might be able to tell you what the strain is. Locate the decryptor and locker, and if you're successful, but don't plan on it, then use the recovered data. Again, don't plan on it, and then they go into prevention mode if that does work. If you do decide to pay the ransom, you may or may not get your files back. At the very least, in your ransomware negotiations, ask them to prove to you that they can decrypt your files, and they'll probably do that for you. They'll give you a tool that'll decrypt, like, let's say 10 files, and they'll successfully do it, and then you pay it. But it may not work on all your files, so you got to be prepared for it not to work. Also be prepared that these are not good guys, people. After you pay your ransomware, they're not just going to go away because they're good guys and you paid them. They're probably going to sell your data. So you've got to be prepared for it. Another reason why you may want to think about whether or not to pay it. You're getting back in business, but if they sell your data and you're in trouble anyway, why waste the money? Again, go into prevention mode. Rebuild from scratch, wipe the machines. You'll be starting over. We have found, we've helped a company remediate this, and it takes about 2 weeks to lap time. I'd say 3 weeks of actual time, human being time, to rebuild a JD Edwards backup from scratch. And that assumes you have the database. So that's a big if. And we'll talk again. I mentioned I'd talk more about that. Be prepared in advance. Pay the ransom. Don't assume that it's over. Watch out for imposters. How about that? Even amongst thieves, there are thieves. So be careful. They might try to get you to pay the wrong Bitcoin wallet. Also in advance, before. If you think that maybe it's a possibility someday, even if you don't think it's a possibility, get a Bitcoin wallet. The last thing you want to do is go through the validation process. Getting a Bitcoin wallet takes time. You have to prove who you are. They want copies of your driver's licenses. They may scan the iris of your eyes or get fingerprints. So getting a Bitcoin wallet can take time. Set it up now and be prepared. Also, if you've ever heard of the Onion Network, there's a browser called Tor. You may need that if you get hacked, because they're going to want you to pay in Bitcoin via the Onion Network, which is not readily available via, Mozilla, Internet Explorer, or Chrome. I do find Tor to be annoyingly slow, though. Just keep that in mind, but have it downloaded and have it ready. Some recommendations. This is CISO type of work here, and this is my opinion. It's a lot of CISOs. 2 high-level recommendations. If a machine, I should probably reverse these machines. If a machine is exposed to the internet, do not store critical business data on that server. Keep it isolated from the other machines. So let's say your JD Edwards database server. Don't put it in your DMZ. Don't have a hole poked in from the internet. If you need access to it, even your web server is not really a good idea to access via the internet. Put a proxy server in the middle. So do not store business critical data on a server that is exposed to the internet. Now you still need to take patches. So technically it is exposed to the internet. There's things you can do. You could have sacrificial patch servers, which are designed to download patches, and then your internal servers can download from that. But so rule number 1, don't store business critical data on a server that's on the internet, and take all patches and patch updates. And honestly, every 30 days isn't even good enough. You need to do it as soon as they're available. I tell everybody minimum of 15 days, and even that might not be fast enough for taking patches on publicly exposed machines. My opinions. Okay, so that's the NIST wheel of things. Make sure all of your endpoints are protected with next generation solutions. Sophos, good tool. I like personally, I like Sentinel-1 because it's got that 0-day. It's not looking at common vulnerabilities. Common vulnerabilities means everybody knows about it, right? Including the hackers. They're looking for 0-day attacks. You need your tool to be able to detect bad behavior versus a common vulnerability. I mean, you need both, really. But things like Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, good tools. Protect your perimeter, your firewall. You need next generation firewall with whitelisting. Email, you need tools like Proofpoint, Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection, Minecraft, all great tools. Segment your network. You can take a zero trust approach, encrypt everything everywhere you're at. Especially your JD Edwards database. They can't, if they break into your system, if they can't get to the data easily because it's encrypted, the only way they'd get to that is if they knew how to use JD Edwards, but they can't use stock database tools for exfiltrating your data because it's encrypted. So you need to, you might want to look into that. SD-WAN, zero trust solutions, all great ideas. DMZs, I'm not going to get too much into the proper network design. You want to consider pen testing, vulnerability testing, and rating services. Test your backups and DR process. In the JD Edwards world, we can rebuild your entire system if all we have is a database. If you have 100 servers, 2 of them are databases, and 98 of those get destroyed by a ransomware attack, but your database server is either intact or you have an immutable backup, that we can restore from, we can build your system. That's where you want to make that your number one priority, is protecting your database backups. Make sure they are immutable or offline. Educate your people using fish testing services. GSI, we have a fish testing service. We use KnowBe4. There are other tools like Mimecast as a part of email has great tools. And again, make sure you print out your incident response plan and have a rescue manual. I also am working with people that want a separate ransomware attack. Honestly, folks, you might have RPOs and RTOs set up with your with your line of business, your providers, if you're using a provider, but that goes out the window with ransomware. You may have 1,000 people in your company. There might be 50 of those devoted to IT to protect you, but they have 50,000 people trying to hack you in. They are going to eventually try, or they're going to try hard to find a way in. Good for you if you can block them. But also, you know, I'm going to say this, if you do get hacked and do get penetrated, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad security officer. It doesn't mean you had bad tools. It means you have a very sharp person that circumvented your tools. Therefore, one of the things that I say that intrusion prevention is nice, handy. You should do everything you can to prevent intrusion, but intrusion detection is absolutely a must. If you have been hit, you need to know that you found it, and you need to work on improving your detection time. If it's taking you 6 months to improve detection, you're not doing a good enough job. If your detection period is a half an hour, maybe that's not bad. It's something you have to work out with your business. Is that acceptable risk for you? And maybe it is, but to get from the half hour to the 1 minute might cost you more money than you can afford in tools. So you just have to think about these things. All right, let's see, let's continue because I'm getting behind. Couple of things you can do, scan for open ports from the internet. You can use a tool called Nmap. We like to use BitSight because BitSight is stores databases and gives you a score like security score. I like to think of it more like a home, an external vulnerability scan. It's your home, and this really just checks to make sure that all your doors and windows are locked. Which is the first thing. What it doesn't do is prevent somebody from throwing a brick through your window and crawling in. Okay, so it just kind of makes sure that all of your doors and windows are locked, which is a good habit. It'll find open holes, especially outdated cable modems and routers. Look for open shares. Back in the early time of JDs, open shares was everywhere. Now open shares are they're just dangerous, guys. You gotta stop that. Also, if you want to know if you're being attacked or if somebody's been in your system, the best place to look is your outbound traffic. These data exfiltrators and encryption have to talk to the mothership for direction because of how they're structured. If you start seeing weird outbound traffic going to places that you don't recognize, or sources, you know, and just so the best places is look for spike, and that'll often, you know, give you your command and control. Uses FTP style traffic. So most people are looking for inbound traffic. Also look for outbound traffic because of command and control. DNS protection, absolutely love it. If any of these people use registered names, Cisco Umbrella, tools like that, capture it. I find that we use it, and I find that it blocks 80% of our problems. Doesn't even need to get to Sentinel-1. We used to use Sophos. Doesn't even get there. We have Defender at a certain extent as well. It blocks it, and it's great. Also, test your antivirus software. If you go to knowbe4.com, there's a tool that you can download for free. A lot of good free tools at KnowBe4 just to test it. And it will test your antivirus to see how good it is at capturing zero-day style tracking. Again, another thing you should probably do in the next day. I would say 100% of the malware remediation that GSI has been involved with in the last few years have involved a VPN tool where they did not use 2FA. Now, 2FA is not foolproof. They can break through it, but it makes it harder, and it may get the hackers to look at somebody else. You want also, if you're using 2FA, cell phones are easier to break than things like YubiKeys or code authenticators like Microsoft and Google all have authenticator tools. I would use those over texting, but as a last resort, texting is better than not having MFA at all. Look into zero trust. Trust nobody unless you specifically grant it. Consider blocking, and you're going to love this one. Consider blocking all attachments and links, especially from external users. Now, that one's going to be a political football for you. Your company might say, well, we can't do business without it. Well, how did we do business 35 years ago when we didn't have email? There are ways around it, or you can set up secure email locations. Basically, when you put something into a link or an attachment, your email system has become a file transfer mechanism. When did email become your file transfer tool? So again, you may have some negotiating to do there. You could also implement software restriction policies or use a tool like Microsoft's App Locker or Threat Locker if you want a really good tool, where you only allow people to run the tools. If you're going to work for the Department of Defense and you want to be a DoD subcontractor, application whitelisting or backlisting is an absolute requirement. So anybody seeking NIST 800, 171 or CMMC certification has to have application whitelisting. What can the hackers may get into your system, but if they can't do anything once they're there, it's just another layer of protection. Here's one particularly true of your cell phone. I mean, how many of you have a game, solitaire on your phone, and it's free? Okay, free. What comes with free? Ads, right? And guess where some of these ads come from? Nefarious sites trying to, take over your phone. Buy the program, pay the $2, pay the $3, the $10. Don't use free programs, especially on your phones. Use complex passwords or go passwordless. Everybody's like, how could passwordless be more secure? It is, trust me. Passwordless is brilliant in getting you in, but especially for browsers though, you want to use a password program like LastPass that can generate or RoboPass. LastPass does have a free version for individual users. We use the commercial version because we also use it to store vaults for connecting to clients that is very, very secure. These tools generate passwords. Also, you want to go into your browsers and look back. Again, I mentioned this earlier. We have a video on how to protect passwords and user IDs inside of your browser. If you have port 3389 open to the world, you are asking for trouble. Multi-factor helps with it, but port 3389 is the hacking port. And I can guarantee that if you set up a Windows server in a cloud environment and you leave that open before you even finish setting up the machine, the hackers are coming at you. All right, so this is what you waited for. Thank you for sticking with me for 30 minutes. I went a little longer. Some JDE thoughts related to some of these threats. And I know this can be a big one, but within the last couple of years, Oracle modified the system so that you can move PDFs and media objects into the database. Do that if you can. Some people say, well, I have a terabyte of media objects. Yeah, that's a big project, guys. We know that. It's going to be slow and cumbersome. Print queue objects are a little easier because you can do queue by queue, but media objects is an all or nothing thing. Database replication tools are awesome. DataGuard, availability groups with SQL Server. I mean, there's just some really cool tools, and you can, and you want to make sure that you make your database backups immutable. One of the big questions that came up to me recently is, how do I know that my data hasn't been touched? And that's a good question. It's really hard to answer. What I recommend people do is they have during their DR run, get with your functional folks and have them also test the system and give them a stamp of approval. Have your functional folks say, you know, as a technician, as a DBA, I can give you an immutable backup, but if that immutable backup is of data that's already been corrupted, what good did that do you? Did you no good at all? You backed up corrupted data. So do a last known good and then start your backups forward following your mutable policy. And then in the event that you're hit, you can roll back to a couple points, but you might be missing data. You may end up having to go back to your last known good, but you know where it is and when it is. You may have to do that once every quarter, once a month, starting to get into pretty intense. Eliminate all shares. They're terrible. At the very least, make sure that the shares are visible only to trusted people. Again, I mentioned this before, if you're on 9.2 and later, we can rebuild your system. JDE is a metadata-driven system. Even the code now is uploaded into the database. Remember, the deployment server used to be the repository. In general, web servers, AIS servers, and enterprise servers can all be rebuilt quickly and easily. If you store system objects on the machine, they may need to be recovered separately. Again, consider network segmentation, but you have to be careful. JDE is chatty. And we actually did in our lab, we put our web servers on a different subnet, even though the latency is 1 millisecond. Boy, it's dog slow, especially for package builds. The database server, enterprise server, and interactive web servers, they really kind of need to be on the same segment for performance reasons only. For safety reasons, it's terrible, but you just need to understand chatty means those servers need to be there. You can put an AIS server in a DMZ based server as long as it's like a batch load and not something that's being used chatty. If you do put things like the deployment server on its own subnet to keep users from traversing your network, just remember, package builds are going to be slow. Workstations the same way. Best thing you can do, put all servers behind a firewall and do not allow them access to the internet, even for patching. You can use a patch server. Again, I mentioned this before. If you are using a VPN without multi-factor authentication, it's just a matter of time before you get hacked. They'll find you. And remarkably, they're good. We've wondered how they got some passwords, and they're good at it. They get them from sold on the internet. They have password crackers as well. Watch out, and this one was recent. I just recently added. Watch out for JDE integrations, especially things that have ODBC style connectivity. That's old systems 10 years ago. A lot of people did ODBC direct connectivity. Be special care on that and making sure that traffic has not been hacked. Another thing, if you haven't upgraded the tools 9.2.6, 9.2.6.3 is current, but 9.2.6.4 for web and AIS. Security history has been greatly expanded. You'll need to take a planner ESU and this ESU and UDO. In addition to what's been in security history for 20 years, they'll now add the long user ID, the client host name and IP, which environment, which release. So if somebody from your company normally is sitting in Chicago and they sign into your system with an IP that is there, that's okay. But if now that ID or some kind of IT comes from a host IP that's outside of that, maybe they're in Russia, you've got people accessing your system. You could technically plug this into a SIM if you figure out how to export that data maybe into a flat file or direct connectivity into a SIM, and then you could use log analytics to determine some of those things. These are just some of the programs that Oracle is providing now. They capture logs from the enterprise server, et cetera, Jazz Server, AIS, all the way through connectors, web, and FAT clients. That's where they get the data from. And there's also some dashboards that they provide automatically that you can browse. And in our document, there's an Oracle document on enhanced user security if you want to know what this is. In some of the material that Oracle provided to us, they said that that this can be used for tracking cyber attacks. Yet when I talked to my people at Oracle, they didn't really know what that reference was. But if you want to dig in deeper and view some of the, they actually have videos on at this link. So if you get this, you can track it through. So final question, how many of you have implemented 2MFA for your MODAC solution? Hopefully all of you. You need to implement MFA on your VPN. If you're not, you will eventually be hacked, and that's not pretty. So Mike, I went over by a couple of minutes, but let's see, what are some of our next steps here? If it's not a matter of if you will get attacked, it's a matter of when, and preparation is the key. If you've never been attacked, I'm impressed. I'm sure you're being attacked. It's a matter of whether you prevented the attack. And it is no embarrassment in today's date to have been hacked. They're smart, they're good. Just be prepared. If you're not going to lose your job for being prepared. Having an incident response plan, having a ransomware remediation plan will certainly help you out.
Awesome.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah.
First, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see that.
First 5 people that respond, we can do an external vulnerability report. Remember, that was the doors and windows. If you want something like that for attending today, we will generate a report of your company and send it to you. It's very good. We actually use it to submit to our insurance company to show that we're mitigating problems. When we started out with our vulnerability, we didn't have the best score. It wasn't horrible, but we mitigated several problems, a couple of old routers that had old code on it, some headers in our website that had gaps in it, allowing TLS 1.0, just not really cool things. You mitigate, you get a better score, you submit it to your insurance company, and you can say, hey, look, guys, we're doing some good things here. Mike?
You know, when you run those reports for clients, do you usually find that they kind of knew maybe something was out there, but they couldn't pinpoint it, or is there always something that raises eyebrows?
Well, it's a good question, Mike. A lot of people are offended that data is available. The thing to remember is these external vulnerability tools, BitSight, I can't remember, Secure Report Card, they only look at publicly available data. So you shouldn't be offended. They've found stuff on you that is available to hackers. And they do some, like they create honeypots and sinkholes that, they buy up old nefarious sites that were, it's like they're an affiliate of one of the Lockbit. And if a company stops registering the site because they've been found out, they'll re-register that site, and a legitimate company will register that site, and they get the reports from the hacker tools that tell them where to look. And that's how they just kind of gather data via, and just Google a cybersecurity sinkhole, and it'll tell you what that is. Mm-hmm. All right, all yours, Mike.
Well, we really we've got a couple questions here. One, and I'll try to simplify it, is do you find somebody in an administrative position who's trying to run a program, do you find that the posture, do you find they make different decisions if the posture is, I'm going to prepare and work on my network as if the hack is going to happen, as opposed to trying to prevent one? I know you just said that, assume you're going to get hacked, but I can imagine you work with different clients, and some of them have different postures, and you just almost try every time to get them to prepare for the worst, and then you're ready for it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's got to also remember a lot of what you do, depending upon the size of the company. And honestly, folks, even small 10-person companies have similar problems to 10,000 employees versus 100,000. They're very similar results. And some of the bigger companies, they have more money to invest in it, but you have the same problems as that. And you can't invest in a 200-person staff for mitigating the issues. But again, it all comes down to risk. What can you tolerate risk-wise? If you have a risk of, and you have to look at your risk, you know, like ransomware, it's big, right? Everybody should have ransomware on one of their, if you're not doing an asset-based risk assessment, let's say you're doing a vulnerability style one, you have to look at what is the risk? Well, ransomware is going to hit. What happens? What's your probability of being hit? Probably pretty high right now. What will it cost you? Well, let's just estimate. Let's say you're a bigger company. Let's say you estimate $1 million. But let's say it takes you $5 million to mitigate against that data loss. Do you spend $5 million to save $1 million? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe it's a reputation thing. You know, maybe you got to spend that $5 million because of reputation, not because of, you know, it would cost $1 million if you got hit. So a lot of it is about risk and what you should do into what you should do, and how much money you should spend on tools.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, it's right at our time here. It's 3 till 3, so we'll let everyone go. I will remind you that if you have any questions, feel free to any more additional questions, just submit them. We can answer them. I also posted in the chat a link to to subscribe to our YouTube page, as well as we have a cybersecurity playlist. So we also have JD Edwards and different practice group playlists. So you're welcome to click on those. But we don't have any more questions. And just on behalf of GSI, I really appreciate everyone joining us today. And have a great rest of the week. John, any final thoughts?
No, just be on the lookout, everybody. It's JD's got vulnerabilities. Make sure your database is backed up, and by God, lock down you know, lock down your backups.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again, and see everybody. Have a great rest of Thursday and Friday and a weekend. Take it easy.
Thank you. Bye.